Hi everybody, I'm Tim from troutandfeather.com, and thanks for viewing this YouTube fly tying tutorial on tube flies. This is part of a series, and this is part 1. Tube flies are not something that I've been tying for a very long time. In fact, if I ever read any articles about them or came across any websites, I would just quietly kind of look past that and keep going. However, I just kept reading more and more about them, and I kept trying to think of ways to integrate them into my fly fishing. But then whenever it came down to actually getting into the tying of tube flies, I really wasn't sure where to begin. There's lots of great resources out there. There's books, there's websites. It's almost too overwhelming. In fact, it was for me. So I can really understand that if you're a beginning fly tyer, that's a really overwhelming process, because just getting into tube flies was just a large process. Well, I kind of did my research. I wanted to jump in, but I wasn't quite sure where to go. I thought about the vise, the materials, the flies that I was going to tie, and most importantly, how I was going to use those flies. So I'll kind of work backwards. I'm a trout fly fisherman. I fish for steelhead in the Great Lakes, and I get on the salt a few times a year, but primarily freshwater trout. So I thought, are tube flies really something that I can integrate into my fishing? For trout, maybe a little bit. I also fish for striped bass. Absolutely. How about for steelhead? Without a doubt. For salt, I wasn't quite sure yet. So then I thought a little bit more and more, and I looked into purchasing a vise for tube flies. And they were really quite expensive. So I kind of did a little bit of searching and found a few things, and eventually found out that there's a starter tube tool made by HMH. So I looked into this a little bit, and I thought, all right, this is something I can get. It's around $20, $25. It came with a little bit of some tubing, a couple of pins, and kind of a beginning location. So I thought maybe this is something I should jump into. Then I did a little more research, and I realized that they sell an actual universal tube fly method starter kit. I'm going to actually take you through this kit later in the video to show you everything that comes in this. But if you're anywhere in a starting position like me, maybe invest in this kit, because for $50 you get this tool, you get a DVD, and you get a bunch of materials. That was really the starting spot, because I wasn't quite sure where to begin with all these materials. I don't have a lot of friends in Western Pennsylvania that tie tube flies, so I really wasn't quite sure where to start. Well, I purchased all this stuff, and I started just integrating this into my tying. And I looked online, looked on YouTube, looked in some magazine articles, and I found some starter flies, but nothing was really jumping out. I had this stuff, and I really wasn't quite sure where to take it. And then I just lucked out this summer. I received my Fly Fisherman magazine in the mail, and this was the April-May 2014 edition. It featured April Vokey on the cover. I thought, well, might be another nice little magazine. Hope it's going to be worthwhile for a read, and sure enough it was, because there's not one, but there's 2 incredible articles on these flies in this magazine. So as I looked through this, there was an article from April Vokey talking about these tube flies. But it wasn't just tube flies, it was the notion of stacking them. And by stacking them, I'll talk about that in a later one of these videos, but basically having multiple tubes on your line. So that seemed interesting to me, and I kept kind of investigating a little bit more and more, and then sure enough, there's another article in here from Tom Rosenbauer. He's just like an expert on everything he does. And he goes on to call it this mix and match system, where he has a head fly and a tail fly, but they're each on tubes, and you can kind of mix and match as you go. I read those 2 articles, and I was immediately sold. I just wanted to just start tying and just run off in about 100 different directions. So I'm first going to really refer you to this magazine. If you're not quite sure you want to spend $50 on that starter kit, start with these 2 articles. Maybe Google the articles. I think you can find them online. Read them, and I have a feeling you'll probably want to jump in too, because there are just so many features of tube fly fishing that are just incredible. Before I break down that kit, the reason I really got sold on this tube fly fishing is really simple. My fly boxes are starting to get full. My trout boxes are looking full. My steelhead boxes are looking full. My striped bass boxes are looking full. I mean, I just love tying flies, as you can probably tell in these videos. And it's starting to get a little bit of a problem. Whenever I read more about these tube flies, it seems like a lot of these guys will just carry them in Ziploc bags. They got a bunch of tubes, and they don't have to worry about hooks. They might carry a half a dozen or a dozen hooks on the water with them. So what's great about these tube flies is that you can literally tie some type of a knot on your line that will have a circle on it, and then you can instantly just take off that hook, slide a tube or two tubes on it, place the hook back on it in just a matter of seconds and have your fly changed and have it be a very effective and successful fly. To me, that just seems awesome. It seems incredible, and it was just too good to be true. Yet it's not. These tube flies have been out there for a long time, and I absolutely waited far too long to jump into this fly tying game. So what I'm going to do next in this first part, I'm going to take you through this starter kit from HMH and just show you everything that they feature in it, talk to you about a few of the different styles, and then just finish the video with that said. In these future parts for this YouTube fly tying tutorial for tube flies, in these future episodes, I'm going to show you some of the patterns that I enjoy tying, how to tie them onto your actual rig, and then some ways to fish those flies to be successful. So let me get everything a little resituated here, and I'll show you some of the materials that are included in this kit. Before beginning this section of the tube fly series, I want to stress that I'm not getting paid nor am I endorsed by HMH. This was the direction I took when I first started tying tube flies, and it's one that I'm recommending to all of you because all the materials they provide are quality materials, and it gives you a great overview of everything that tube flies have to offer. This is the packaging that's provided whenever you purchase the kit. Again, it's around $50 or $60, and I'm going to take you through all the materials that are included in this. The first one that I recommend watching is the DVD. This basically gives you all the ins and outs of tube flies, goes over some tips and techniques, and shows you some sample patterns. Basically, all the information's loaded on here, and it's a great watch. Next is the starter tube tool. It looks like this, and to me, this is a really important just piece of hardware. It's simple to use, and it instantly will convert your vise into a tube vise. I tie with a Stonfo Cayman, and all I really have to do is open the jaws, make sure it's straight, and that's it. I've just instantly converted my Stonfo into a tube vise. Now, I have not used a tube vise before, so I can't compare this to the tube vises that are out there. If you have, please leave any thoughts down in the comments section of this video because I'd be interested to know what you think of this tool compared to an actual tube vise. What I can tell you is that Tom Rosenbauer recommends this tool. I've used it. It works wonderful. It's very low priced, and this is the direction I would take if I were you. Along with this tube tool, it comes with two pins, basically a large and a small. The small is 41 thousandths of an inch for the outside diameter, and the large is 62 thousandths of an inch. You can buy other sizes of these. They're easily adjustable. Slide them in and out, and it will then lock them in place. Also included in this packaging are two types of tubing. For starters, you have basically what I call the tube fly tubing. This is more of a rigid tubing, and they give you two sizes. It's basically a small and a large, and this is all called cut to length, which means you just cut it based on the length that you want. It's not extremely flexible, and whenever you feel it, it kind of feels like, if you think of a Q-tip, those plastic Q-tips, a hard plastic Q-tip. Next included in that is this stuff called junction tubing, small and large. They just give you short sections of it. This junction tubing is really recommended by Tom Rosenbauer in his article because what he does with this is he ties his tube fly, he slides it onto his line, he slides a small piece of this junction tubing on his line. Sometimes he'll connect flies with his junction tubing, those tubes, and he'll also connect the tube to the hook. What he'll do is basically slide that junction tubing onto the tube and then slide the junction tubing over the hook eye. Thus, it will connect this tube to the hook until the fish takes, which at that point it will disconnect and your tube gets out of the way. I'll be talking more about that in later parts. The next material to me is without a doubt probably the best one that HMH has, and it's called this hybrid tubing. They give you a medium and a large. I'm going to show you the large, and what's great about this stuff is basically think about those prior tubes that I just showed you. The junction tubing and the actual tubes. This is a combination of the two. If you check out HMH's website, they basically say this is the stuff to get. And if I was going to recommend one of these materials over everything else, it's this stuff right here. Because it's flexible enough that it could slide over a hook eye, but it's also rigid enough that you can tie on it. To me, this is really just that cat's meow. It's a great material. It's not the cheapest, not the most expensive, but if there was one material I would say go with, it's this stuff right here. Again, that's the hybrid tubing. Next, they give you more of their rigid tubes. They give you two sizes, basically a small and a large, an eighth of an inch for outside diameter, and 3/32. These are basically similar to the ones that I showed you previously. It's basically the same thing, they just give you a bunch more. Next, they give you some hook holder tubing. This is the same as that junction tubing, a small and a large. This package said chartreuse. It's not. It's a clear, and it works really well. The next one is an interesting one to me. These are poly tubes. They're semi-flexible. What's great is that they're colored. Whenever I typically think about the shank of a hook, I don't really worry about the color unless maybe it's a steelhead fly and I'll tie a red hook whenever I'm tying an egg fly. That's about it whenever I'm talking about colors. And when I first saw these, I thought to myself, I'm not going to use these colors. I mean, who would need a colored tube? But the more and more I thought about it and the more and more I investigated, I thought, geez, I could see how steelhead guys could really get into this stuff to really elicit a strike from a fish. But then also how you can use these colors as the body of a fly. Then you don't have to worry about a material. If you're not looking for a material that has a lot of movement in the water and you just want a color, these really just take that place. Next, HMH provides a little micro tubing. This is a 1/16 of an inch outside diameter, really small tubes. You're talking trout flies whenever you see this stuff. Next, they provide metal tubes. This is really cool. Copper and aluminum, a couple different sizes. Whenever you think about weight, this is what you should go. If you're thinking about tying flies that really need to get a little bit further down than the average one, you'll want to start investing in these metal tubes. Because with these, you're going to add a lot of weight. If you think about Tom's mix and match system, you can have, we'll say, a plastic tube in the back, one of these metal tubes in the front, then you can almost provide a little bit of a jig type action. Then the last material will provide a lot more of a jig action. We're talking a conehead. They can provide a lot of weight. What's neat about these coneheads is that you can put them immediately on that tubing, especially that smaller tubing, the micro tubing, and lock them in place. Or a lot of guys just basically carry a pack like this on the water, and whenever they want to add a conehead, they just take off their tube flies, slide a conehead onto the line, put the tube flies back on, connect them to the hook, connect your line to the hook with that, with your circle knot, and go from there. And I keep saying circle knot, I should be saying a loop connection. I'm talking about a loop connection when you're connecting your hook. Well, with that said, those are all the materials that they provide. Now, I need to stress here that this is a really great kit. And this is the direction I took. It is not the direction that you have to take. I really am going to stress that in this part 1 of the Tube Fly series, I think that you need to have some type of a back, some type of a base, and to me this HMH kit was it. Now with that said, if you've used other materials that you believe are just beneficial and are the way that others should start, please by all means leave those materials in the comment section of this video because I'd love to read about them, as I'm sure others would too. The other thing that I've noticed is that there's a lot of everyday materials out there, like those Q-tip tubes that guys are tying on. That is awesome because that tells me that there's alternatives out there. They're probably going to be a little less expensive than some of this tubing if you're buying it from a fly tying company. Thus, if you have some alternatives out there that you've used and had success with, by all means list them in the comment section of this video because I guarantee that others would love to really learn more about them. Well, with that said, again, this is part 1 in a series. Please check out the other videos in this series of tube flies, as I believe that they are really just a wonderful set of flies, and I hope that I have kind of introduced you well to this kit and kind of given you a nice overview of everything that this tube fly material really has to offer. Well, with that said, I'd like to thank you for viewing this YouTube fly tying tutorial on tube flies. If you'd like to watch more of my YouTube fly tying tutorials, you can do so at my website, which is troutandfeather.com. As always, if you have any thoughts, any questions or comments, please feel free to leave them directly on this YouTube page, or as always, you can email me at tcammisa@gmail.com. Thanks everybody for viewing part 1 of this tube fly series
of fly tying.